Hi, welcome to this series of Parenting with Purpose and African Wisdom as we look through my book. I'm Dr. Gladys Mwiti. We're looking at chapter 4 as we look at principles of parenting. And this chapter is on the principle of passing on legacies. Parents passing on legacies to our children. We looked at the definition of a legacy, the legacy of obedience, and today we look at the legacy of sexual morality. And as you are aware already, if you've watched us before, we use African proverbs in my book and then biblical proverbs. The first African proverb, I'm not sure which country of Africa it comes from, says that if a mother steals with a child strapped on her back, what do you expect of the child? Wow, that's wisdom. And then another African proverb, a woman who pursues a man for sex loses her spiritual beauty. The next one is from the book of Proverbs, chapter 7, verse 25 to verse 27, says, "Now, my sons, do not let your heart turn to her ways. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death." Let's look at the meaning of these proverbs and how they apply to our principle today of sexual morality. The African proverb, if a mother steals with a child strapped to her back, what do you expect of the child? This is a rhetorical question that reminds us that children begin internalizing their parents' values very early. In this proverb, the word steal does not necessarily mean pilfering or pinching something belonging to another person. Rather, it points out the reality that children are copycats, more or less implying the fulfillment of one of the common sayings repeated by children themselves. They say, "Monkey see, monkey do." Young ones absorb the values of their parents, good or bad. Hence, history has this uncanny way of repeating itself. The second proverb, a woman who pursues a man for sex loses her spiritual beauty. A reminder that true beauty is from within and that it is so fragile that once it's lost, it's difficult to reclaim. Immorality is one sure way of losing the inner beauty that makes a woman glow, however ugly or beautiful she may be on the outside. The biblical proverb, "Now, my sons, do not let your heart turn to her ways. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chamber of death." This refers to the adulteress. That's actually what the proverb says, the subject of the whole of chapter 7. Who is an adulteress? Other meanings of this word are wayward wife or prostitute. These are the women who commit adultery or fornication. They don't have to be commercial prostitutes. They can be normal women in the population, in the village, in the community. But if they are wayward and they commit adultery or fornication, they can be described as adulterers. Adulterers, we know, are married people who sexually move outside their marriage beds, and fornicators are single people who seek out others for sex. The proverb warns sons, but the Bible is written in a figurative manner because the same refers to women. and could easily read, "Now, my daughters, do not let your heart turn to his ways. Many are the victims he has brought down. His slain are a mighty throng. His house is a highway to their grave, leading down to the chamber of death." The focus this time would be the adulterer, the male prostitute. Sexual morality is a legacy worth passing on to children in a clear, discernible way, a clear, discernible manner. Recently, the Sunday Nation, that is our Kenyan newspaper, carried the story of Nollywood's Desmond Elliot. He is a Nigerian film star who, in an interview on morality, among other film stars, emphasized that unlike many popular movie stars who have a bevy of women hanging around them, and others who marry and remarry several times, he has managed to stay true to his wife. And was asked, explain that. How has it happened? His answer was, "When a woman chases after me, I run for my wife." I ran for my wife. Elliot narrated that just like with other film stars, some women want to sleep with him, but is determined to safeguard his marriage and not to have an affair. At the end of the day, he says, "I know I have to go back home. I run because I have ambitions which I don't want women to ruin for me." Sexual morality is a value worth protecting. One day, when Desmond looks in the eyes of his children, he can say, "I determined that adultery will not ruin my ambitions. You too run, you must run from adulterous women or fornicating women." In our time and age, only a morally upright parent can discuss the value of morality with his or her child. As much as sexual immorality seems to be the norm, young people passionately long for adults who can model faithfulness and sexual uprightness. In particular, they desire to know that their own parents can model this hope for them and for their own children. Parents should never give up instructing their children on how to live with sexual integrity in a very permissive society. Instruction assumes knowledge, where the teacher has more awareness on a subject than the student. This is because when a parent tells a child to resist the temptation of sex outside wedlock, as God commands, the youth may ask, "But why?" The parent cannot answer, "Because I said so," or "Because God commands." An intelligent, curious youth will desire to know more. So the parent will have to tell more. When answers are not forthcoming from parents, or when parents do not link a child with a trusted source of information, the young one seeks their trusted teacher elsewhere. Other children who may know more of myths than truth from the internet, for example, or pornography or sexual perversion, they'll go ahead and teach one another. To ensure that the parent knows more than the child, the parents need to seek to know more than the child. For example, with all sorts of information on sex in our society, parents should know enough to critique messages that enter into our space from the media, from the school system, music, movies, television, novels, advertisements, social media, and much more. There are some critical questions for which parents need to find answers. For example, there is a current argument in many forums today that youth need to be taught that there is something called safe sex. so long as they commit themselves to safe practices. So safe practices is equal to safe sex. First, we know that there is no safety in breaking God's law, just as there is no safety in breaking the highway code or the law of gravity. There is no safety from breaking the highway code or the law of gravity. So there is no safety in breaking God's law on morality. Let us assume for a moment that sex outside wedlock can be safe and examine some arguments that have been put out there arguing in support of what is called safe sex. Parents need to check out some of these arguments and determine if they are true or they are mere myths. For example, number one, stop trying to teach your children sexual integrity because all teens and young adults are sexually active anyway. Are they? Many research surveys report those who are sexually active, not those who are not. Once I read a study that indicated that 42% of teenagers in the sample said yes, they have lost their virginity. The recommendation was therefore teach adolescents to use condoms and the pill because they will have sex anyway. The researcher, however, left out a critical fact that 56% of the children said, no, I have not had sex. Another 4% did not mark the item or their response was not clear. The 56% who indicated no are a majority, and they have another safe sex method that was left out of the discussion of the study. No sex or abstinence was already working for the majority of the children in this study. That's one thought. Second one, sex can be safe because condoms protect against unintended pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases. Do they? Combined with over 30% of condom failure when used 100% by adults, how will children who forget pencils and books at home remember to carry their condom 100% of the time? Let me repeat that. When adults use condoms as prescribed, there is a failure over 30% by adults using as prescribed. How will children who forget their lunchbox at school and come home without it remember to carry their condoms? Point number 3, teenage pregnancy and the sexually transmitted disease rates would decline if we would provide teenagers easy and free confidential access to condoms in schools. Check out studies in nations like USA that have had safe sex campaigns for many years. Have sexually transmitted diseases declined? I read a 2014 report by Center for Disease Control that indicated that only a fraction of these diseases are reported in America. CDC adds that the reports received indicate that STDs have become a significant challenge facing United States. The report estimates that nearly 20 million new sexually transmitted diseases and infections are reported every year, and half of them are among young people 15 to 24 years old. These new infections account for an additional national health burden of $16 billion The reports add that each infection is a threat to the health and well-being of each individual and carries the risk of future infections that could lead to complications of fertility and ectopic pregnancy. New strains of STDs are always popping up through mutation. Indeed, medical research is not able to keep pace with these new species that do not respond to any known medication. In 2013, a new strain of gonorrhea called A8806 popped up in Hawaii and has also appeared in Norway, Australia, and Japan. The strain is not responding to known antibiotics, and it seems to have more fatality power than the AIDS virus. These are quiet details that we never hear. Friends, gonorrhea has the capacity to mutate and form unknown strains that are a step ahead of medical research. This STD is more common, that's gonorrhea, among 15 to 24-year-olds, and symptoms include infections in the genitals, rectum, throat, a burning sensation during urination, increased discharge for both men and women, and for women, vaginal bleeding in between periods. These are scary truths, parents, and they tell us that sexual immorality and more is present. And I wonder which parent would leave sexual education to charlatans who may care more for other gains than for the holistic health and the well-being of our children. This is a heavy topic, parents, the legacy of sexual morality. And there are no two ways about it. We need to own it, live it, and pass it on to our children. God bless. Keep reading my book. It's available in bookshops and also on Amazon. God bless.